Warning, this podcast contains heavy spoilers for not just one movie, but entire franchises. We highly recommend going and watching these movies before listening to us as a companion piece that stitches all the timelines into one creepy, crime-ridden story. There will be no more spoiler warnings. We do not break character. After this, there is no turning back. You've been warned. Hit the music.
You are talking about the nonsensical ravings of a lunatic mind.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's
alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello, freaks and fiends, and welcome to It's Alive podcast. This is a true crime, paranormal, interstellar podcast covering unbelievable stories that sound like they were ripped straight from the pages of a Hollywood script. I am your host, the outlaw Dr. H.R. Smokenstein, THC, and with me, as always, is my very own Scream Queen, the perfect combination of beauty and brains, the bride of Smokenstein, the India Hard expert, the guts and gore, the gorgeous, the sexy Amy Rose.
Hi.
Last week, we promised all the chaos this week. We did the background last week. We promised chaos this week. So let's not keep the people waiting. Let's get cracking with this and give them the motherfucking chaos.
Okay. So last week we followed the escape of Robert Sawyer and the creation of Otis B. Driftwood. We saw how the Firefly family was built from the ground up, piece by piece, with a structure that on the surface looked more refined than anything the Sawyers had operated before. But structure only works if it's maintained. And what we're about to see is what happens when ego and impatience begin to override discipline. Because while Otis believed he had evolved beyond the chaos of his family's past, the truth is he had only rebranded it.
Yeah, to understand that, we need to go back to something we've touched on before. The Sawyer families never had a normal understanding of sex or relationships.
No.
There was no intimacy, no emotional connection. No concept of desire in the way most people understand it. Sex was function, a means of survival, a requirement to continue the bloodline, and everything else that would normally be expressed through connection, affection, or attraction was instead redirected into violence.
Yeah, violence became their control. I like that their release, their identity.
So, does that mean they're hitting up Shudder while the rest of us are using Pornhub? Imagine what would they turn into Otis and me like, what's your favorite porno? Oh, Hostel, really? That's interesting. That's the genre where random people meet in a hostel and have sex, right? No. What do you mean the one directed by Eli Roth?
You mean Hostel is not a porno?
What?
Huh? So when Otis came along and began to reshape himself during his time in the institution, what he was really doing wasn't removing that foundation, but building something new on top of it. Through his exposure to Dr. Quayle and his obsession with figures like Charles Manson, Otis became fascinated with ideas like free love and liberation from societal norms. But he didn't interpret those ideas in the way they were originally intended.
Which just makes him even more like Manson, really, isn't it? I mean, Manson and his family essentially killed the hippie movement. They killed the Summer of Love.
Yep.
He didn't really understand the concept of free love either.
No. Yeah, well, Otis took it a step farther than even Manson. He filtered the idea of being a hippie through his own warped understanding of control. What should have been about mutual freedom became, in his mind, a justification for taking what he wanted without consequence. And when he arrived in Mexico and embedded himself within the Driftwood collective, he was given the perfect environment to test that belief.
Yeah, but again, nothing was replaced.
No.
Everything was layered. Violence remained at the core. Control remained the objective. The only difference was that now it was dressed in a language that made it feel intentional.
Yeah. Baby only accelerated that shift. Where Otis needed philosophy to justify himself, Baby operated on pure impulse. She didn't need meaning. She didn't need a reason. She simply acted.
And in many ways, that made her more honest than Otis.
No,
More
yeah.
honest in her intention.
That's
Otis.
true, yeah. So when Cutter tipped them off about a group of cheerleaders stranded near the gas station, the situation immediately stood out. They were isolated, vulnerable, and most importantly, easy.
Yeah, cheerleaders are notoriously easy, all right.
You know that's not what I meant. And yeah.
I stick by my statement on with the story.
So this is where things begin to change, because up until this point, Otis had been operating with a level of caution, whether consciously or not. The victims had been people who could disappear without immediate consequence, people on the fringes, people who didn't generate attention.
Yeah, people who enjoyed themselves too much and refused to conform is what you mean, fucking pigs. They fucked us with the law, but we fuck anything we're not married to, and we are on our own when the sexual sadists turn up.
And they're the people that went missing.
Yep.
Okay. So by late 2004, that caution Otis had been practicing since his escape had begun to erode. The House of 1,000 Corpses project, originally intended for Halloween 2003, had been delayed. Months had passed. The work was close to completion but not finished. And for Otis, that delay created pressure. Not external pressure, but internal.
See, now here's the one place where we can actually sympathize with the killers. I mean, how often have you had contractors promise to get the job done in a week and 6 months later you're still walking around your house tripping over tools and materials? I can imagine the frustration is only intensified when the material is decaying while you wait for the builders to show up.
At least with actual builders, you don't have the smell of decaying.
You do when they don't show up. Well, yeah, in his case, not our case.
Oh, okay,
In our
okay,
case,
I get what you're saying.
I
now,
understand what you're saying. I was still thinking in Otis's mind. It's like, fuck me. I got that flesh specifically for this fucking ceiling. It is now all dried and shriveled. What the fuck
See,
are you doing?
think
Where the fuck is O'Reilly?
sheets of drywall and stuff smells as bad as rotting flesh at the end of the day. So Otis's patience had a limit, like most killers. The need to act, to prove concept, to bring the vision to life. And once that shift happens, patience disappears. The project stops being something he's building and becomes something he needs to use.
And to him, these girls weren't individuals. They were symbols. Representations of everything he believed was wrong in the world. And once someone becomes a symbol instead of a person, the barrier to violence disappears. Because now it isn't about harming someone, it's about making a point.
Yeah. And at this stage, Otis believed that he was untouchable. There were no investigations pointing toward him, no pressure from law enforcement, no reason in his mind to hold back. But that belief was built on a misunderstanding. He hadn't outsmarted the system. He simply hadn't triggered it yet.
And that distinction is what makes this moment so important. Because this time the victims weren't drifters.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't people who could vanish quietly.
No.
They were locals, recognizable, connected, and when people like that disappear, they don't fade into the background. They create noise, they create urgency, they create attention, and once attention enters the picture, everything changes.
Yeah, the first real crack in the Firefly's operation is here. Not a mistake that can be ignored, not something that disappears over time, but the moment where the story stops being contained and begins to spread. And once that happens, the ending is no longer a possibility. It's an inevitability.
Yeah, again, I mean, I said it in the last episode. I'll say it again. We are seeing, while he might call himself Otis B. Driftwood, we are seeing the same Sawyer mistake happen again for the 6th time. We got Nubbin's fuck up. Then we got Otis's fuck up.
Yep.
Then we got Tex and Tinker and Alfredo. I would say Alfredo was probably the biggest fuck up there. And then we got Vilmer's fuck up. So that's 4 fuck ups. So this is fuck up number 5. And the same fuck up is that, well, I suppose technically when it comes to Tex and the boys, they didn't do this. Their fuck up was just pure coincidental that Ken Forey or what was it, Ken Forey? The the dude who's a doomsday prepper himself happened to come along in the situation where they were trying to take travelers.
Yeah.
But in other cases, it was always just a case of them hitting too close to home or hitting too close. And I mean, obviously, the original incident in 73, again, they did go after people traveling through the area, but Nubbins had done so much damage at the fucking cemetery that there was attention already on Newt County.
Yeah.
And this is the same fucking issue again. It's like this dude has stayed so careful. We spoke about it last week about how he had even went so far to have Tiny and Rufus go to other counties to rob graves to help build the House of 1,000 Corpses. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, bang, he's attacking someone right in their locality. So, I mean, you know, make sense of that. Why are you suddenly hunting so close to fucking home again? You know,
makes no sense.
But again, we've said it a million times, making sense of a senseless mind. Do you know what I mean?
True. So they found the first girl, Karen Murphy, alone on the side of the road. And the car had broken down roughly 10 minutes from Spalding's gas station, leaving her separated from the rest of her group and exposed on an otherwise empty stretch of road. She was taken quickly. There were no witnesses, no signs of struggle left behind that would immediately raise alarm. And by the time anyone realised she was missing, she was already gone. The remaining 4 girls were last seen at Spalding's gas station itself.
All right, now I gotta try and say some names. Investigators would later identify them as Torrance Shipman, Missy Pantone, Isis Union, and Courtney Kramer. It's believed they were taken from the station with the assistance of Cutter and Ravelli, making the abduction appear almost seamless. Just another group of travelers passing through a quiet roadside stop.
At the time, nothing about it stood out. No immediate panic, no obvious crime scene. Just 5 girls who, for a short window, simply vanished. What happened next would only come to light much later through evidence recovered during the investigation and the recordings the family themselves had left behind.
Yeah, because the Firefly family didn't just commit these acts, they documented them. They saw themselves as more than killers. Mm-hmm. They saw themselves as creators, artists, even filmmakers. They'd have been made up in today's society. Imagine following that TikTok account. Tutorials on how to make masks with material you can grow yourself. And if you can't find enough of it to finish a job, then hit up your local thrift store. It's called a graveyard, Otis. How many times do we have to tell you this? Not thrift store, fucking graveyard. And then Baby on OnlyFans, the name alone would make her a fucking $1,000 in a day. I mean, look at how crazy the online pervs went with Sydney Sweeney this week and her Euphoria baby scene.
Well, you didn't watch Euphoria, so how would you know about Sweeney's OnlyFans scenes?
The research of this show takes me to some dark places, Amy. I'm not going to lie to you. I just you know, you type this stuff in, it comes up in the computer. Don't search my computer, please, law enforcement. But just out of interest, how do you feel like dressing up like a dog?
All right, can I move along with here what we're doing? Thank you.
I really wish you would, but yeah.
Move along or get dressed like a dog?
So they idolized old horror films, grindhouse cinema, exploitation television, and they treated their actions as something to be captured, archived, and revisited.
Yeah, according to court records, Otis separated the group and he took 3 of the girls and Baby took the other 2. From that point on, what followed wasn't random violence. It was prolonged, deliberate, and structured around control. Otis subjected his victims to extended periods of psychological and physical torment. He delivered long, rambling speeches, even framing his actions as lessons, presenting himself as a product of a broken system rather than the cause of what was happening. So, what was the psychological torment his speeches?
Oh, yeah. Okay. The psychological side. There's a lot of physical.
I would assume so, yeah.
But yeah, he liked to place his blame outward. On society, on the man, on anything that allowed him to avoid responsibility. So yeah, and listening to him was enough psychological torture to be that. Yeah. You didn't need extra.
No.
I mean, you got this fucking jaundiced looking motherfucker screaming at you about the man and how it's his fault, but you're too
fuck,
pretty
kill
in
me
plastic. Fucking, you're too pretty in plastic because you're following the advertising of the man. Your brain is completely washed, Amy.
So in these sessions, they weren't brief. They lasted hours at a time, repeating, escalating, wearing down resistance until the victims were no longer seen as individuals, but as material within his process. When he wasn't speaking, he was acting. The violence was methodical, drawn out, and often interrupted only when something else captured his attention.
It's crazy because when you look at all of this, it's exactly what a fucking cult leader would do to break somebody. But yeah, he didn't have the patience. And when you say captured his attention, that kind of means he rather got the horn from the chaos and wanted to go get the ride, or someone who was about to become his Sistine Chapel.
Exactly. In his mind, everything served a purpose. Every act contributed to what he believed he was creating.
Oh, also, psychological fucking damage could have been done as well through all the raping that he liked to do.
Well, that's physical and psychological.
Well, it's still psychological.
Okay.
Anyway,
that's true.
Baby, by contrast, had no interest in justification. Where Otis framed his action as ideology, Baby stripped everything back to instinct. She didn't explain. She didn't rationalize. She reacted. Her focus was immediate. Control, humiliation, and domination expressed without any attempts to disguise it as something meaningful. A true Sawyer at the core.
Yeah, she altered her victims physically, treating them less as people and more as objects to be reshaped. The idea of appearance, identity, and beauty became targets in themselves.
Yeah, she liked to give her toys makeovers. Haircuts that usually included chunks of scalp. Manicures that saw her file nail down to bone. And again, she'd slay with TikTok tutorials.
I'm sure she would. Here's one I made earlier. What Otis approached as a distorted philosophy, Baby approached as a game. And throughout it all, the rest of the family watched and they participated as an audience. They recorded, they replayed, they treated the footage as entertainment, something to be consumed and revisited, reinforcing the belief that they were doing what was not only acceptable, but worth preserving. But this time, the choice of victims changed everything. Up until now, their targets had been people who could disappear without immediate consequence, people whose absence would not trigger urgency.
Yeah, this was the difference. These were local girls, recognizable, connected to family, schools, communities. Their disappearance created questions that couldn't be ignored. Searches began. Timelines were built. Attention shifted.
Yeah, and once that attention began to focus, the Fireflies, for the first time, moved from operating in the background to becoming a part of a story that was starting to surface. This was the first domino. The moment where what had been contained started to spread. And while Otis believed he was beginning his All American Massacre, what he was actually doing was setting in motion the chain of events that would eventually bring everything down around him.
Again, this is the tainted blood of the Sawyers bleeding through the new persona. They can't help themselves. I mean, is Otis more dangerous for wanting recognition, where before he lived amongst a clan of hidden monsters? Do you think this need to be seen as a fucking artist suddenly makes him so much more fucking volatile? Like,
Yeah.
Because obviously, at their core, the Sawyers, they relished in anonymity. They liked being hidden. They liked being a myth. This guy, I mean, no one goes into artwork with the idea of being
never
anonymous.
Being known.
Do you know what I mean?
Unless you're Banksy.
Yeah, but that dude's still making a lot of money doing
Apparently
what
it's
he's
a collective now.
Yeah, who
knows? Exactly, because they wanted to be anonymous, Josh.
Fair point.
So, the Rugsville cheerleaders were, but I would agree with you. I do think, because it's like BTK, he wanted recognition for what he did. It makes him more dangerous. It makes him more fucking evil, to be honest. The Rugsville cheerleaders were never intended to be the main event. They were the precursor, the opening act, a signal of what was coming next. And that raises an important question. Was their abduction an act of impatience, or was it something more deliberate?
There's been an ongoing debate among investigators and true crime analysts about Otis's intent at this stage. Whether he was building something to be experienced in secret by a select few, or whether he intended for it to be discovered. Because for someone who viewed himself as an artist, like we just said, the idea of creating something to keep it hidden doesn't entirely fit.
No.
Art is, by its nature, meant to be seen, to be discussed, to be understood. And when you look at what follows, it becomes increasingly difficult to believe that this was ever meant to be or remain contained.
On October 30th, 2004, the night before Halloween, the next group of victims enter the story.
Yeah, this is where Otis is screaming at his contractors. The housewarming is fucking tomorrow. Finish this shit up or I'll see you in small claims court, you motherfucker.
Denise Willis was traveling cross state with her boyfriend Bill Hudley and their friends Jerry Goldsmith and Mary Knowles. Bill and Jerry had been close for years, bonded by a shared fascination with the macabre, horror, true crime, roadside oddities. They were in the process of working on a travel book documenting unusual attractions across rural Texas. And inevitably, that kind of journey leads you to places like Captain Spaulding's Museum of Monsters and Madmen and Gas and Fried Chicken, whatever.
Yeah. The stop itself wasn't planned. They were low on fuel and Spaulding's offered both gas and curiosity in equal measures. And as Amy said, fried chicken.
Yes.
And come here, I'll put over for the fried chicken any day.
Not what you were saying last episode. Flip-flopping.
Well, it depends. I mean...
If you were hungry enough, you'd be like, oh, give me the chicken.
Yeah, how much weed have I smoked at this point?
Are you driving at this point?
What age am I at that point? Because that would answer that question differently. If it's no,
Probably
no.
in your 20s.
Oh, well then, yeah, I'm high as fuck and I'm just driving. It's like, oh, look at that place. We need to smoke another joint before we go in there. That looks like it'll be
Open
fun.
the door and all the clouds come out.
So they pulled in, filled up, and decided to explore.
The attraction itself was simple. A guided ride through staged scenes of violence and infamy. I always think of that joke whenever I read the word infamy.
What joke?
Infamy, infamy. They've all got it, infamy.
I've never heard that one.
Makes me laugh
Okay.
every time I say the word. So Spaulding stood at the front delivering his performance while Ravelli operated the cart that carried visitors along the track. And each section highlighted figures from real-world notoriety. Albert Fish, Ed Gein, Lizzie Borden.
Albert Fish makes my stomach turn.
Crawl, yep.
At the center of it all, the local legend that had begun to take hold of Rugsville, Dr. Satan.
For Bill and Jerry, this was exactly the kind of story that they'd been searching for. And Spaulding knew it. He told them the tree where Dr. Satan had supposedly been hanged was only a few miles down the road, and he even drew them a map. Whether that was coincidence or intention would only become clear later. The group set off, following the directions, and at some point along the road, they encountered a hitchhiker, a young woman standing alone as the rain began to fall, and they stopped, picked her up, a decision that in hindsight sealed their fate because the hitchhiker was baby, and at first nothing about her raised immediate alarm. She presented herself in a way that disarmed suspicion, carefree, naive, playing into expectations. And her appearance did most of the work for her, and she understood exactly how to use it.
Yeah, I kind of mentioned this last week when we talked about how she kind of ripped people off at the strip club. You know, that became soliciting sex off her.
Yeah.
Like from the description I've read about her, she played the dumb, ditzy, blonde thing down to a T.
Yeah.
She knew what men thought when they saw her, and she knew what women thought when they saw her. You know, because let's face it, once women see the hot blonde flirting with their boyfriend, they instantly get the bimbo slut bitch as well.
Of course
fucking
they
idea,
do.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And she saw this, and despite the gimmick she played, she was a master manipulator. She was happy to play the bimbo persona to disarm her prey.
Yeah, and to those who didn't know her, she did seem harmless. But to those who did, she was anything but. What she projected outwardly was performance, and what sat beneath it was calculation. From that moment on, the situation was no longer chance. It was controlled.
What happened between that pickup and their arrival at the Firefly house remains unclear. But evidence recovered later confirms that all 4 kids ended up there that night. I say kids, I reckon they must have been in their early 20s.
Had to be. So footage found during the investigation shows them inside the house, seated and watching what can only be described as a stage performance put on by family. Like Grandpa delivered crude off-color jokes. Baby appeared in costume, miming along to I Want to Be Loved by You by Helen Kane, played into the same exaggerated persona that she had used earlier.
What do you do in that? I mean, I can imagine like that if I went to anybody's house, even normal people's house, and it's like, we're going to do a variety show. I'd be like, oh, no. I need to get the fuck out
I'd ask could I be part of it.
Depends. If they did it, maybe, because I've seen the footage, some of the footage of Baby performing and some of the footage of Hugo. Because obviously they're not going to put the violent shit out there online. But you can find these little clips on like fucking Murderpedia and all this kind of shit.
Okay.
And Hugo made me laugh a little bit.
Huh?
And Baby wasn't bad at her performance. But I mean, at the same time, you know. At first, it played like entertainment. Uncomfortable, but controlled. That changed quickly as the performance continued and tensions rose. Baby's behaviour towards the men became more overt.
Of course did.
Mary Knowles reacted.
Of course she did.
An argument broke out and the tone shifted.
Yes. So Denise can be heard asking about their car, specifically whether Rufus had finished working on it, which suggests their presence at the house may have been tied to mechanical trouble rather than immediate force. And that detail matters because it implies they didn't realise the danger they were in until it was already too late. Yeah,
the footage becomes unstable, voices overlap, movement increases even. Then, just before the recording cuts out, Mama Firefly can be heard shouting for them to leave. And then the tape ends. What happened after that is unknown. There are no recordings for that. No surviving witnesses. Only what was discovered later.
Because the next time Denise Willis, Bill Hudley, Jerry Goldsmith and Mary Knowles were seen, they were no longer alive. What the Firefly family hadn't accounted for was something simple, something easy to overlook. Because while mobile signals surrounding Spalding's was unreliable at best, the payphone still worked.
Yeah. Remember them kids? No? Fuck them old.
They're usually defibrillators now. They are, though. We're in Ireland, so I don't know about anywhere else. And that small detail would prove to be the first real crack in their control.
What, me being old?
No, the defibrillator phone boxes. I'm joking. Maybe it's because the dementia is definitely starting to set in with you, though.
Very fucking funny. Get on with the story before I forget what I'm talking about.
But when Denise Willis arrived at Spalding's, she used that phone to call her father, Don Willis, a retired detective. And the call itself was routine. She checked in, told them they were running late, and mentioned where they were at Captain Spalding's, Rugsville. She assured him that she'd be home by morning. At the time, it meant nothing, just another quick call. But for Don Willis, that information would become critical, because when the morning of October 31st came, Denise wasn't home, and when he tried to call her, it went straight to voicemail.
See, I always, this is the best thing about having mobile phones or cell phones for the Yanks is this ability to be pinpointed really quickly to where you are. I mean, I even said it to you one time. I was like, if you ever find yourself walking down the street and there's someone behind you making you feel uncomfortable, like another man walking behind you feeling uncomfortable, video call me. Raise the phone up so that they can see you fucking talking to me, and they can see that they are now on camera, and that instantly diffuses the situation because now there's evidence.
I can't think of the guy's name, but there's a guy on Instagram, and that's what his videos are. So like he has a video for every situation. So he'll be there miming on camera, and he'll be like, "Wait, don't answer it yet, don't answer it yet." And you hear the calling, and he'll be like, "Hi, babe, where are you? Oh, you're in your Uber, okay?" But like if you've watched these little videos, they're a great idea because you know where to answer back and be safe.
100%. So for most people, that might have been enough to wait. And I'm talking back again about her dad getting the voicemail. Most people would just hang tough and wait, give it some time, assume there was a delay. But Don Willis wasn't most people. Years on, the force had trained him to recognize patterns, and more importantly, to recognize when something was wrong.
Yep, and he didn't hesitate. He contacted Rugsville PD immediately. He told them everything he knew, the last confirmed location, the name of the place, and that was all the officers needed.
Yeah, because Captain Spaulding wasn't unknown to them. he had a history, obviously.
Obviously.
And so, or captain's, so did his location. He's his fried chicken place. I'd assume they must have been out there many a times with the health inspector.
Probably. Shut
Just
down
trying
at
to
least
get the
once a
health
month.
inspector in there before the fucking clown went crazy.
So the response was immediate. Officers moved straight to the gas station, and Cutter didn't deny anything. He confirmed the group had been there the night before, and he told them that they had taken an interest in the story of Dr. Satan and that he'd given them directions to the supposed location of the hanging tree.
I think in 7 episodes of talking about this family tree, this guy is the smartest of all of them.
Oh, I'd say so, because he wasn't blood related.
Well, we'll make that point by the end, I think.
Okay, cool.
On the surface, it was helpful, but it also pointed the investigation away from him towards something else. And that's the thing, like, most people who are doing stuff like this, when the information is brought to them, it's lie, and then deny. You know?
Yeah.
Whereas this guy's like, yeah, sure, they were here.
Yeah, of course
They
they
took the ride. They enjoyed everything. Show them where Dr. Satan's tree was. We'll try there.
The officers leading the case were Lieutenant George Wydell and Deputy Steve Nash, both familiar with the area, both aware of the people who operated within it. And following the information given, they made their way to the location tied to the Dr. Satan legend, and what they found there changed everything. Bill Hudley's car had been abandoned. It showed no signs of damage. It did show signs of damage, pardon me. There was windows broken, bodywork dented, not the result of normal wear. Something had happened there.
Well, not unless Bill was a secret demolition derby driver.
Well, yeah. Then it would be
To be
normal
fair,
damage.
the Southern Americans know how to have fun. Monster trucks, rodeos, demolition derbies, throw in some pro wrestling. I'm there, man.
And then in the trunk, they found a body. Karen Murphy, one of the missing cheerleaders. She'd been bound, positioned deliberately, and carved into her body were the words, "Trick or treat."
Yeah, okay. Maybe the trade-off isn't worth it.
No.
Fun entertainment, but also severe head trauma from the fun that gets people killed, carved and thrown into a trunk to rot. I can live without the rodeo, to be honest.
At that point, the situation shifted immediately. This was no longer a missing persons case. There was no ambiguity left, no uncertainty about what had happened. Like, this was an abduction, a homicide, and a message.
Because the way the body had been left, it wasn't an accident.
No.
It wasn't hidden.
No.
It was meant to be found. I mean, just the writing on the fucking body, you know, which suggests intent.
Yeah.
Not just violence, but presentation. Something designed to be seen.
Yeah.
Which might have just answered our fucking earlier question. Really.
There you go. And once that line is crossed, the stakes change completely. Because if one victim is found like that, then the likelihood of others still being alive begins to disappear quickly. When Don Willis was informed of the discovery, he didn't wait. He didn't sit back and rely on procedure. He got in his car and headed for Rugsville himself, because at that point, this wasn't just a case, it was personal. Back on the ground, Lieutenant Wydell began working through what he already knew. Rugsville was small, tight. Everyone had a role. Everyone had a reputation. And when it came to vehicles, repairs, and anything mechanical, there was one name that stood out. Rufus Teasdale. Wydell knew him, knew his connections, knew his family, and he also knew that the Teasdale home wasn't far from Spaulding's. That connection alone was enough to justify a visit. But there was more, because Wydell also knew Gloria, knew her reputation, and knew how she operated within the town.
Yeah, he heard she was handy with a ride too. Like mother, like son, hey?
Oh.
Eh? Nothing? No?
Then there was Baby. How couldn't he know about her? Her behavior, her run-ins, the kind of attention that she attracted. Individually, none of it was enough, but together it formed a pattern. So once Don Willis arrived and joined them, there was only one place to go, the Firefly house. Not with certainty, but with enough suspicion to start asking questions. And from that point on, the investigation was no longer circling the edges. It was moving directly toward the source. So October 31st, 2004, Halloween. For Otis, this wasn't just another day. This was the moment everything had been building toward. The unveiling. The culmination of months of work, planning, and obsession. What he believed would define him. His statement, his legacy. And because of that, everything needed to go exactly as he envisioned.
This is my special day, and I swear if anyone ruins it, I'm going to throw a full-on
It's
butch
so
fit.
weird. I literally did have Bridezilla vibes off that. But reality had already begun to interfere.
Fuck!
By the time law enforcement arrived at the Firefly property, the situation inside was already volatile. Multiple victims were either dead or in the process of being tortured. The cheerleaders had been stored separately, hung in a meat locker shed behind the house, not hidden, but not immediately visible unless someone knew where to look. Inside the house, the situation was worse. Bill Hudley is believed to have been dead by this point, although later forensic analysis struggled to establish an exact time of death due to the extent of what had been done to him. Evidence recovered during the investigation suggests that Otis had spent hours with him the previous night. There was no urgency, no attempt to conceal. Instead, what occurred was prolonged and deliberate.
Yeah, a recording later recovered from the property shows Bill restrained, subjected to sustained physical and psychological abuse while the family members observed.
By the time his body was recovered during a later raid, it had been altered significantly, reconstructed, displayed, and presented as something other than what it had been. The piece was given a name, Fish Boy. And that detail matters because it reinforces what investigators had begun to suspect. This wasn't just violence, it was staged, designed, framed as expression. And that mindset made the situation far more dangerous because it meant Otis wasn't thinking in terms of survival or escape. He was thinking in terms of completion.
Let's explain Fish Boy.
Go for it.
So, after Otis had finished torturing him and essentially Bill died from the torture, Otis took the body. And again, this is a man who made a meat puppet out of his twin brother.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
This is a man who had built furniture from fucking bones, lamps out of fucking skin. You know? He was handy with his hands. He knew he was good at... He liked these arts and crafts. And he, for some reason, got this inspirational thought to turn Bill into a merman, essentially.
Yeah.
Pictures of the macabre sculpture would show the top half of it. He dissected him. He split him in two, took the legs off of
bisected
him. And bisected him, cool. And replaced his leg with a fake fish tail that he had designed himself.
Yeah.
So actually, if Otis had just went down the art road, he actually would have been okay at art. But the fact that he required humans to do his art is what really fucked him up.
Yeah.
So the top half was Bill,
but the bottom half was,
and he was positioned to look like he was kind of on a rock in the middle of the water.
He was sunning himself.
That real traditional kind of fucking mermaid kind of image where the water's splashing up and the legs are just kind of folded over there. That kind of shit.
Okay. So now with police on the property, the timeline was collapsing. If the situation escalated, if additional agencies were brought in, if the property was searched thoroughly, everything would be exposed. The entire operation. Destroyed before it ever reached the moment he had been building toward. So he acted. Inside the house, Lieutenant George Wydell entered with a mama Firefly.
Just one second. I would just like to also say, if the property was searched thoroughly, if the property was barely glanced in the window at, they were probably getting done. But yeah. Thoroughly would have fucking just screwed the pooch all together for these people. Anyway, so inside we got Wydell. Outside
we got Don Willis and Deputy Steve Nash, and they moved around the property. What happened next unfolded quickly. There were no signs of a struggle inside, no indication that Wydell had time to react. At some point during the interview, he turned his attention away. Investigators later believed he'd been distracted by gunfire outside. In that moment, Gloria shot him at close range, a single shot to the head. Outside, the situation escalated simultaneously.
Yeah, outside, Otis engaged Don Willis first. Multiple shots, no hesitation, no attempt to restrain or control the situation. Don was killed where he stood. Deputy Nash was next. Evidence suggests that he had already surrendered after Don was killed.
Yeah.
There were indications that he had attempted to de-escalate, possibly hoping for some sort of compliance or mercy. it didn't matter. He was executed, one shot, precise, final, gangland execution style.
At that point, the situation crossed a line that could not be undone. This was no longer a contained case involving missing civilians. Law enforcement had been targeted, killed. And that changes everything, because while civilian cases can sometimes move slowly, get buried, or lose momentum, the killing of police officers guarantees escalation. Resources increase, pressure intensifies, and the response becomes immediate. The Firefly family had just ensured that what was coming next would be far bigger than anything they had faced before. But even in that moment, Otis's actions reveals something else, something that ties him back to his past, despite everything he claimed to have become. Despite his attempt to separate himself from the Sawyer identity, elements of it remained. After killing Don Willis, Otis removed his face, and later he used it as a mask. He presented himself to Denise while wearing it, a direct act, deliberate and symbolic, because whatever Otis believed he had built with the Firefly family, he had not left the Sawyers behind. Whether it was imitation, influence, or something deeper, the connection was still there.
Yeah, some have argued that this supports the idea that Leatherface was never one individual, but a role passed between members of the family. We discussed this last week. A constructed identity used to control. Others maintain that Bubba Sawyer was a real individual, a singular presence within the family's history, based on the material recovered, particularly the notes and interviews conducted with Dr. Quayle. The latter appears to be more consistent. Otis spoke of Bubba as real, not a concept, not a mask, but a person. And in moments like this, it's difficult to ignore the possibility that Otis was doing wasn't just functional, but reflective. I mean, again, we were only after pointing out just a minute ago that they had a few cheerleaders hung in a meat locker, and now the dude's walking around with someone else's face on his face. It's all starting to feel very reminiscent to very early days Sawyer activity.
Exactly. It was like a connection to something he had not fully let go of. And as the situation escalated around him, with law enforcement closing in and the structure he had built beginning to fracture, those old instincts began to resurface, which suggests that no matter how far he believed he'd moved forward, he was never as removed from his past as he thought.
Yeah, like I said, it's just reliving the good old days at times. And I stick by it because you look at his name, Otis B. Driftwood. And again, a lot of people believe, while some people say that the B was just thrown in there to make it sound cooler, I don't believe that. I believe it was a call to Bubba.
There is a chance that the B could stand for Bob, which is short for Robert.
Didn't think of that.
Okay.
But see, well, again, why is he cutting the face off of fucking people and playing that up? You know, it just seems like a very... to know how to do that, to do that and to kind of play it up, it's almost like he was like putting in little Easter eggs for the law enforcement to connect who he actually was.
Maybe he just
if he knew
Bubba.
Law enforcement was starting to come down on him, it was like, how do I just throw a little Easter egg here and there to make him realize that Chop Top never died?
Yeah,
you
true.
know, and then that this is my call to let Bubba know that I know he's still out there too.
Yeah,
you know?
actually, yeah. So, Halloween night 2004, the ritual begins. And unlike anything that had come before, this wasn't something the Firefly family intended to keep memory alone. They documented it extensively.
Handheld camcorder footage, rough and unstable, captured the night as it unfolded. Inside the mine system itself, additional cameras had been set up, feeding back into the house, allowing the family to watch the progression in real time. This wasn't just participation, it was observation, controlled from a distance. The entire event designed to be experienced more than once.
The surviving victims, Denise Willis, Jerry Goldsmith, and Mary Knowles, were dressed for some reason as rabbits and restrained. Each of them placed on a leash, led on foot toward the entrance of the mine system. Throughout the walk, Otis spoke continuously, reciting passages from the Satanic Bible, delivering them not as performance but as instruction. Around him, the rest of the family reacted, encouraging, echoing, reinforcing the atmosphere he was constructing.
Imagine the sight. 6 lunatics in ritualistic clothing leading 3 people dressed as the Easter Bunny on Halloween night just strolling through a field screaming, "Preach, Brother Otis, preach! Hail Satan!" Then again, it is Halloween. It's probably the one night you probably won't get away with that shit.
Probably. By the time they reached the entrance, the structure of what was about to happen was already clear. Waiting for them was a large coffin, big enough to hold all 3 and placed at the mouth of a vertical shaft leading down into the mine. There was no attempt to disguise what it was, no illusion of safety, only the next step. And at that point, Mary Knowles broke and she ran.
Yeah, the footage shows her breaking from the group and disappearing into the darkness. Baby followed immediately. The camera does not capture what happened next. Not in full anyway. But when Baby returns, she is alone, covered in blood, calm, and certain.
Later investigation would recover traces of Mary's blood near the abandoned graveyard connected to the property. Beyond that, there were no further signs of her. Denise and Jerry did not resist again. They entered the coffin, whether through fear, exhaustion, or understanding that there was nowhere to go, they complied. The coffin was sealed, lowered into the shaft, a lantern followed, then the entrance was closed.
Yeah, inside the mine, the environment had already been prepared. Speakers placed throughout the tunnels played a repeating line. "Bury me in a nameless grave." A reference drawn from Aleister Crowley, another figure Otis had studied and incorporated into his worldview. I'm sorry, but if you've been in an orgy with L. Ron Hubbard, I'm not taking anything you say seriously.
No. Once inside, Denise and Jerry acted quickly. They broke free from their restraints and forced their way out of the coffin, but that moment of escape had already been accounted for. The structure of the maze depended on it. This was not about confinement. It was about movement, progression through a controlled environment. Above ground, the family took their positions, each assigned a role and each becoming part of the experience. Rufus appeared first.
Yeah, dressed in costume modeled after his father, Earl Teasdale, referred to by the family as the Professor. That title has no clear origin, but within the structure of the night, it functioned as identity rather than explanation. So again, I can't tell you why he was Professor Firefly, but he was Professor Firefly, and that was supposed to be based on Earl Teasdale.
Okay. Others, they took on less defined roles. Figures moving through the tunnels in altered states of appearance, their body covered in part with materials taken from previous victims. Not disguises in the traditional sense, but extensions of the environment. Jerry was separated quickly, taken by these figures and moved deeper into the system, removed from Denise's line of movement. From that point on, he no longer appeared in the same sequence of events. Denise was left alone, forced to navigate the structure herself, and what followed was a progression through space designed to disorient.
Yeah, tunnels reinforced with bone rather than timber, rooms staged with scenes of death and decay, each section functioning as both obstacle and display, an escalation of everything the family had been building towards. Despite this, Denise continued moving. She adapted. What else could you do in that situation?
At one point, she managed to collapse part of the tunnel behind her, creating distance between herself and Rufus. It wasn't a clean escape, but it did buy her time. And in that environment, time was critical. Eventually, she reached the final chamber, where Jerry was found again, but not as he had been.
The figure operating on him was presented as Dr. Satan. Yes, every time we say it, it'll be like
Dr. Satan.
But by this time, it was known that S. Quentin Quayle was dead. What stood in front of her was not the man himself, but a reconstruction, a costume created from his remains, worn by Hugo Firefly, Grandpa Firefly even. Yeah. And when we say operate, we use the word loosely. He was just playing with some dude's brains, really.
That's all. Another layer of performance, another extension of the myth. Denise didn't stay. She moved past it and found an exit point, a narrow tunnel leading upward, and at the end of it, a ladder, the final piece of the structure.
CCTV footage recovered from the mine confirms that she climbed it, reached the surface, and for a brief moment, she was out. But that is where the record ends. There are no further sightings, no confirmed contact.
Nothing to indicate she made it beyond that point, which suggests something else. That Otis had anticipated this outcome, that the possibility of someone making it through the entire structure had been considered, and that measures were already in place above ground to deal with it.
Because for Otis, this wasn't about what happened inside the House of 1,000 Corpses. It was about controlling the ending and making sure it remained his.
The alarm wasn't raised because of the missing travellers. It wasn't even raised because of the missing cheerleaders. It was raised because of the missing police, Lieutenant George Wydell and Deputy Steve Nash, and retired Detective Don Willis. 3 men who should have checked in, 3 men who didn't. And in a case like this, silence from law enforcement doesn't get ignored. It escalates fast. At that stage, Rugsville PD were working with fragments. 1 confirmed dead victim, Karen Murphy. 4 more cheerleaders were missing. 4 travellers unaccounted for, and now 3 officers who had disappeared while actively investigating.
Yeah, that combination alone was enough to push the case beyond local control, and the sheriffs were brought in. And with them came someone who had a personal stake in what happened.
Sheriff John Quincy Wydell, brother of Lieutenant George Wydell. From the moment he saw the condition of Karen Murphy's body, he understood what this case likely was. Not missing persons, not even isolated homicide. Something far worse. And given who was now unaccounted for, he didn't expect to find survivors. The Firefly family came in onto his radar quickly. Almost immediately. But recognition and action are 2 different things, because cases like this don't get rushed.
Not after Waco. Texas had already learned what happened when law enforcement moved too fast against something that resembled a cult structure.
Yep.
The result had been catastrophic, and that memory dictated how this investigation would proceed. Every detail had to be verified. Every lead confirmed. Every connection built carefully enough to hold under pressure.
Wydell pushed the case forward relentlessly, but he was also held to that standard. 6 months passed. 6 months of building evidence, tracking movements, establishing patterns, constructing a case that wouldn't collapse once action was taken. And by the time he was cleared to move, the situation had changed. This was no longer an investigation. It was an operation. And the warrant issued reflected that.
Yeah, entry would be made, apprehension would be attempted, but if resistance was met, any resistance, the response was authorized to escalate immediately. There would be no second chances.
On the morning of April 4th, 2005, law enforcement moved in. Multiple units, heavily armed, prepared for confrontation. And that's exactly what they found, because Otis had anticipated this moment. He hadn't stopped. He hadn't slowed down. He had prepared. An escape route had already been established, a tunnel running from the basement through the ground and out toward a nearby river, a direct exit, hidden, practical, and designed for exactly this scenario.
Inside the house, the evidence told its own story. Multiple bodies were found, recent, unhidden. 2 in Otis's room, on his bed, naked. Another in Baby's room, on her bed, naked.
Of course.
And more in the basement, held in confinement, alive.
Oh.
The activity hadn't stopped, even with the pressure building around them, even with the likelihood of discovery increasing by the day. The Firefly family had continued.
When officers entered the property, they were met with immediate resistance. The family had armed themselves. Protective gear had been improvised, masks constructed from scrap metal. Rufus had gone further, wearing a full suit assembled from the same materials. There was no attempt to surrender. Gunfire started almost immediately, and law enforcement returned fire. Tear gas was deployed, and the situation escalated quickly.
Rufus was hit, killed during the exchange. Hugo Firefly never made it out of his bedroom.
Yikes.
Also killed during the raid. Gloria Firefly, or Mama Firefly, witnessed her son's death, moved towards him, collapsed beside him, and at one point she attempted to take her own life. She raised the gun, pulled the trigger, but the weapon was empty. She survived and became the only member of the family taken into custody that day.
During the chaos, Otis and Baby escaped using the tunnel, disappearing before the perimeter could fully close. They were gone before law enforcement could secure the full property. Tiny was not present during the raid, and he had been out in the surrounding woods, detached from the central events, and more importantly, not immediately identified as part of the operation.
So like Bubba before him in the Sawyer family, he existed on the edges, kept out of sight, not because he wasn't dangerous, but because visibility creates risk. And in that moment, being unseen means he survived.
Yep. Otis and Baby didn't hesitate. They didn't slow down. They didn't disappear quietly. Within miles of the Firefly property, while law enforcement was still securing the scene and processing what had happened, they struck again.
Yeah, their first victim during the escape was Susan Souls, a nurse. Driving home from a night shift, she encountered what is believed to have been Baby lying in the street. Stopped to help, and what followed was quick. Investigators later determined that while her attention was on Baby, Otis approached her from behind. She was attacked, killed, and her car was taken. It was immediate, practical, and set the tone for what was to follow, because this wasn't an escape focused on survival, it was continuation. The same pattern, now on the move.
And from there, their next step was calculated. They needed to reach Cutter. If law enforcement was already inside the Firefly home, then it was only a matter of time before evidence surfaced linking him directly to the operation. Baby insisted on making contact. To her, Cutter wasn't just an accomplice, he was family. Still her primary father figure. The call was made and Cutter gave them instructions. Head to the Kahiki Palms Motel. He would meet them there and he would make arrangements. At the same time, another group arrived in the area, a travelling country band.
Banjo and Sullivan. The group consisted of Adam and Wendy Banjo, Roy and Gloria Sullivan, and their roadie Jimmy Cracker.
They checked into the same motel, unaware of who was inside. Otis and Baby gained access to their room, held them there, and waited. And what happened inside that room wasn't witnessed directly, but the aftermath was. The following day, housekeeping entered, and what they found was described as a massacre.
So you had Gloria Sullivan and Jimmy Cracker. They were found in the bathtub in the bathroom, killed. Roy Sullivan was nearby, sitting on the throne, right in the toilet. His injuries consisted with blunt force trauma, and on the walls, written in blood, was the Devil's Rejects. A name, a declaration, something that would soon be picked up by the media. There was one survivor, Wendy Banjo. She had been left alive, but not unharmed. She was found positioned on a coat hook behind the door, altered. Her husband's face, here we go again, removed and placed over her own. She was disorientated, in shock. Again, I'm telling you, these are just little nods to Leatherface. I wonder myself, was Otis hoping his long-lost brother would somehow hear a news report, put two and two together, and come out of hiding to find him?
Maybe. I don't know about that, but what I do know is that when the housekeeper entered, Wendy reacted and panicked, broke free, ran, and she left the room screaming, unaware of where she was going, unaware of what was around her. And within moments, she ran directly into the path of an oncoming truck, killed instantly. The only witness gone.
Yeah. It's hard to see out of eye holes of a mask that's still wet with blood on the inside.
Well, that's true.
Just slipping and sliding all over your face. It was an accident waiting to happen, really. You'd think Otis, being an experienced flesh mask maker, would take more care in his work.
Yeah. Later, forensic analysis revealed something important. Not all of the killings had taken place in the motel room. Some of the victims had been moved. Evidence pointed to a second location, an abandoned chicken farm approximately 2 miles away. At that site, investigators found blood and fragments of bones, skull to be exact.
And signs of prior preparation. A concealed weapons cache had been buried there, placed months earlier by Otis and Cutter, not for a specific moment, but for a moment like this. A fallback, a contingency, proof that while the Firefly family thrived on chaos, they also still planned for survival.
And now, with law enforcement closing in and their identities beginning to surface publicly, that preparation became critical. because this was no longer a contained operation. It was a manhunt.
And Otis B. Driftwood, Baby Firefly, and Captain Spaulding are now in the centre of it. And with names like that, they're lucky Batman didn't come looking for them, because they sound like they fell straight out of Arkham Asylum.
Before Cutter made his way to the Kahiki Palms Motel, he made arrangements. He had somewhere in mind, a place off the radar, a place that wouldn't attract attention. Cutter had a half-brother, Charlie Altamont.
Yeah, Charlie operated out of a remote desert settlement. Small, isolated community built around vice. He ran a brothel, a strip club, a controlled environment where everything and everyone had a role.
When Cutter reached out, Charlie wasn't pleased. Not with the situation, not with the attention that would follow, and not with the risk that came with taking him in. But family ties carry weight, and in the end, he agreed. Otis, Baby, Cutter, they would be sheltered, at least for a time. A place to regroup, to plan their next move. But while they were moving towards safety, the man hunting them was moving in a different direction.
Yeah, Sheriff John Quincy Waddell made it clear publicly that he was pursuing justice. But privately, that wasn't his objective. The raid on the Firefly house had confirmed what he already believed. His brother had been killed there. And from that point on, the case became personal. This was no longer about procedure, it was about retribution. Waddell brought in outside help, 2 bounty hunters, Rondo and Billy Ray Snapper, known together as the Unholy Two.
Their instructions were simple. Find Otis and Baby, bring them back alive. Through their work, a connection surfaced. Cutter. And through Cutter, Charlie Altamont. Waddell didn't approach it quietly. He went directly to Charlie and laid out the situation clearly. Cooperate or face sustained pressure from law enforcement. Not a single raid, not a single shutdown, but continuous disruption over and over again until his operation would collapse entirely.
Yeah, Charlie understood what that meant. He wasn't just protecting himself. He had people depending on him. Employees, residents, a structure that relied on stability in an otherwise unstable place. Cutter's problems weren't just his own anymore. They threatened everything Charlie had built.
So he made a decision. He brought them in, gave them food, alcohol, drugs, women, created the appearance of safety, normality, a place to relax, to lower their guard. And Otis and Baby embraced it, and they continued the chaos inside that environment.
And when Amy says chaos, she means they had sex with hookers. So pray for me, people. The chaos is real and it hurts.
Oh, stop. You only love it. Cutter remained with Charlie, talking, reconnecting, and as the night went on, the atmosphere shifted. The fugitive was relaxed, and that's when Waddell moved. The operation was precise, coordinated, executed without warning. Each target was taken. Cutter, Otis, Baby, separated, subdued, bound, transported. There was no confrontation that allowed them to fight back, no prolonged exchange, just control and removal. But what happened next confirmed what had already been building. Waddell wasn't operating within the boundaries of the law.
Nah, he sure wasn't. Hours earlier, before the capture, he'd already crossed that line. At the county lockup, he met with Gloria Teasdale, Mama Firefly. The conversation was recorded at first. It followed the expected patterns. Question, deflection, mockery. Gloria didn't cooperate, didn't engage. She provoked. She made it clear she was the one that put the bullet in his brother's head.
Waddell cleared the room, removed any witnesses, and what happened in the minutes that followed wasn't officially documented at the time. But when officers returned, Gloria was dead. She had been stabbed. The initial report stated that she had attacked Waddell and that he had acted in self-defense, but that version didn't hold. During the internal investigation that followed, inconsistencies surfaced. Details didn't align, and eventually the truth came out. It hadn't been self-defense. It had been retaliation. And by that point, the line between law enforcement and the people he was hunting began to blur.
So Waddell wanted it to end where it began, at the Firefly house. Not in a courtroom, not through due process, but at the source.
Yeah. He had Otis, Baby, and Cutter brought back to the property, bound and restrained, each of them tied to chairs in the living room, unconscious when they arrived, having been subdued by Rondo and Billy Ray Snapper during transport. When everything was in place, Wydell woke them, one by one, and he had prepared for this. The camera was set up and positioned to capture everything that followed.
Because this wasn't just about killing them. It was about making them experience what they had done to others. Control, fear, helplessness. He spoke to them, mocked them, turned their own behavior back on them. There was no urgency in his actions. He took his time. With Baby, he used a knife and a stapler. He stapled a picture of his brother onto her. Cutting, measured, deliberate. With Cutter, it was physical, blows, direct, punishment without restraint. And with Otis, it was symbolic. Wydell drove nails through his hands, pinning them into the wood of the chair, a direct inversion of the identity Otis had built for himself, stripping away the performance, reducing it to something else, something far more grounded. Then, as the situation escalated, Wydell made his intent clear. He spoke directly to Otis. He mocked him with a Manson quote. I am the devil, and I'm here to do the devil's work.
So he's framing himself not as law enforcement, but as something else entirely. And with that, whatever line had remained between justice and revenge was gone. He prepared the final step. Fuel had already been placed throughout the house, accelerant, pre-positioned, and the plan was simple. End it there, burn everything.
But before that happened, he made one change. He released Baby. Not out of mercy, but for something else. He wanted movement. He wanted pursuit. He wanted her to experience what it was like to be hunted.
Yeah, she was injured and slowed, but she ran. And Wydell followed close enough to control the situation and far enough to extend it. Inside the house, Otis and Cutter remained restrained, forced to wait. Outside, the situation shifted again. Charlie Altamont had followed, and whatever decision he had made earlier, he couldn't leave it there. He tracked the operation back to the property, found Baby, pulled her away, got her to his vehicle, and he told her to stay there, to wait. Then he turned back, intending to go inside and to bring the others out. But he never made it.
No. Charlie was later found on the grounds, dead, blunt force trauma, severe, an axe wound to the head.
What happened next wasn't fully captured in sequence. Wydell had brought the camera outside with them after setting the house on fire because he wanted to catch Baby's death on camera.
Which tells you it wasn't all revenge. He chose the hot blonde to make a snuff movie with instead of the main instigator of his brother's death. Dude was going to jack off to this tape later, the fucking perv pig.
Careful, that might be slander. But it's a lucky thing he did bring the camera outside. Otherwise, we would never have seen it when another figure appeared on the property, which was Tiny. He had remained outside the core events up to this point, living in the surrounding woods, avoiding detection. But he returned, and footage shows him entering the house, reaching Otis and Cutter, and removing them, pulling them free from the chairs and getting them out before the fire could fully take hold.
Wydell was later found nearby, close to where Charlie's body lay. His neck had been broken. Forensic analysis concluded it had been done manually with significant force.
Yikes.
Tiny became the primary suspect, which aligns with what little is known about his physical condition and strength.
By the time law enforcement secured the scene, the house was already collapsing, consumed by fire. And in a final, unexplained act, the footage shows Tiny returning, walking back into the burning structure, not fleeing, not following the others, but going back inside. And his body was recovered later, severely burned and identified through what remained.
And with that, the Firefly house, the center of everything, was gone, destroyed, taking with it whatever evidence hadn't already been removed, and whatever answers might still have been buried inside.
What was left of the Firefly family didn't run clean. They didn't disappear. They limped, broken, barely holding themselves together.
After hours of torture, injuries, and blood loss, Otis, Baby, and Cutter drove through back roads, trying to put distance between themselves and what had just happened. They were exhausted, fading, but still moving.
And as they drove, the sun began to rise. Behind them, everything was catching up. Mama Firefly's body had been discovered. The truth about Wydell's actions began to circulate within law enforcement, regardless of what the official reports claimed. And in the meantime, the Firefly house had been found. Fire crews responded after smoke was spotted by distant neighbours, and inside the wreckage, one of the most important pieces of evidence was recovered. The tape. Footage of what happened. Proof. The escape of Otis and Baby was no longer a theory. It was confirmed. And now it was public.
Roadblocks were set up across the county, armed units deployed, descriptions circulated. The message was clear. Citizens were not to approach. Report immediately if sighted. These are no longer suspects. They are active threats.
Eventually, the road ran out. The Fireflies encountered one of those roadblocks. Multiple units, officers in full gear, weapons drawn and prepared.
Officer Ray Dobson was in command. He would later describe what happened next. The vehicle approached slowly, then stopped at a distance. Far enough to obscure detail, close enough to confirm that it was the car that they were looking for.
Yeah.
The car matched. The tension built immediately. Weapons raised, positions held. Dobson stated the standoff lasted only minutes but felt much longer. Then movement inside the car. A shift. And then music. Low at first. Barely audible. Then louder and louder until it filled the space between both sides. Dobson identified it immediately as Freebird by Leonard Skinner.
Nice.
The car didn't move, not yet. It sat as the slow opening played. Almost still, almost calm. Then the tempo changed, and so did everything else. The engine revved, the car accelerated straight toward the blockade at full speed.
Gunfire erupted from the vehicle, and officers returned fire instantly. The exchange was overwhelming, constant. The car pushed forward, and for a moment, Dobson believed it might break through, but it didn't. As quickly as it began, it ended. The vehicle lost speed, the driver slumped, and the car came to a stop. When officers approached, the outcome was clear. Otis Driftwood was dead. Baby Firefly was dead. Cutter was still alive. Barely. He was taken into custody. The only one left.
And notably, the only one not tied to the original bloodline of the Sawyers or the Wilsons.
Mm-hmm.
The last surviving member of the Firefly family was the one that had been bought into it, not born from it.
Cutter recovered and stood trial and was given options. Multiple deals were offered: life imprisonment in exchange for cooperation, for information, for a full account of everything that had happened, and he refused all of it, every offer, every opportunity to reduce his sentence. He said nothing, gave nothing, and in 2019 he was executed without incident. No confession, no final revelations.
Nope. And for his final words, the clown gave the same response as the last evil clown to be put to death in America. You can all kiss my ass.
What remained of the Firefly family story came to an end, at least on record.
Because like everything connected to the Sawyers, what's written down and what actually happened are rarely the same thing.
The investigation into the Firefly family left more than just a crime scene behind. It left a ripple through law enforcement, through Rugsville, and far beyond it. Because as the evidence was processed and connections began to form, what initially looked like a contained series of crimes started to expand into something much larger. Otis Driftwood's true identity surfaced. Robert Chop Top Sawyer confirmed. His escape, his reinvention, his role in building the Firefly family. All of it came to light.
And at the same time, another piece of the puzzle finally locked into place. Babby Sawyer, no longer speculation, no longer rumor, but verified. A direct continuation of the bloodline. And with that confirmation came a shift in understanding. Because the events in Rugsville were no longer viewed as isolated, they were part of something ongoing. A lineage, a pattern that stretched back decades. What had once been dismissed as separate incidents now look connected, deliberate, sustained across generations.
But for the public, the story had an ending. the roadblock, the shootout, the deaths of Otis and Baby, and the arrest and eventual execution of Cutter. That was the version that settled, the version that closed the case, at least officially. Because even with all of that, one question remained unanswered.
Yeah. If Babby was real, then so was her dad. And that brings it back to the same name that has followed this entire story from the beginning. Bubba. No confirmed death. No verified capture. Just disappearance. His last known sighting dating back to 1994. And then nothing.
For years, that absence remained exactly that, a gap in the record, until recently, because only months ago, reports began to surface out of Tennessee. Deep woodland areas, travelers, disappearances, and most notably, descriptions of a figure. Masked, erratic, violent, initially dismissed, written off as isolated incidents, but when placed against everything we now know, it becomes harder to ignore.
So the question shifts. Not whether Bubba existed, but whether he ever really disappeared at all. And that's where we leave it. Because what comes next changes the shape of this story again. And we'll break it all down next week on the next episode of It's Alive podcast.
Ooh.
And then, once we've done that, I do not want to hear the word Sawyer again for a very long time.
Yeah, we'll do aliens or something.
Oh, no, we're doing Bigfoot
no, I
next.
know what we have planned next.
Yeah, we're doing Bigfoot
Yeah.
next. That'll be fun. A Bigfoot sighting. But that's after
The next episode.
what we got to do next week, which is get into more crazy backwoods family trauma.
Yay.
We can do it. One more week.
Be fine.
Sure I won't snap. Sure I won't lose my shit. Either way. If you want more of this, then check out the Horrorverse Network on Patreon. It is $5 a month, 7-day free trial. We have It's Alive Action, where we break down the pop culture references to movies or to discussions like this. Movies, documentaries, other serial killers that might relate to what we're talking about here. Mini Monsters, where Amy Rose looks at different cryptids and monsters and witches and warlocks and every oddity.
Ooh, I've
in
never
the
done a
fucking
warlock yet. I should do that.
And every oddity you can think of, and she does it in about 10 to 15 minutes. They're nice little mini episodes. I listen to them going to sleep. I have like a little playlist I listen to, and I just listen to one after the other.
Aww.
And we have Playing with Bones, Celebrity Rap Sheet. We're about halfway through Celebrity Rap Sheet now. We're doing comedians this season. We also have, what else do we have on there? There's Real Monsters if you really want to go digging
There's
back
Real
far.
Monsters. There's the photos.
And yeah, Amy Rose's photo drop every Saturday, full of the stuff you see on Instagram and some extras that they probably won't allow us to put on extra, but not that bad.
Not that bad.
It's enough that they let it put it on Patreon without us blocking it and making it over 18s.
And you can also catch me on Twitch every Monday night from 10 to 12 Irish time at Amy Rose 9.
Playing Slay with Amy Rose. That's it. We'll be back next week with more tales from the Horrorverse. See y'all then. Same Alive time, same Horrorverse channel. Okay, love ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye.